and welcome to the Faith Factor. My name is Liela Fuller, and I'm your host. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about my journey of faith. That's right, I'm going to tell you all about my journey of faith to Minnesota. Um, I actually wrote a book about this, and it's actually part one. There's a part two coming in 2022. But if you'd like to read about it in the fullness, because obviously in our segment here today, we won't have time to get into everything that happened. But if you'd like to read the full book, you can get it today on my website, thoughtsofathankfulheart.com. And if you enter the code Black Friday when you're checking out, you can save 20% off of not only the journey of faith, but any of my books and journals. So let's get into these questions. So the first question is, why did you move to Minnesota and what happened leading up to that? So I moved to Minnesota simply because God said move. I was in a conference and it was a prophetic business, Christian business conference. And I was sitting there, I think it was the first or second night, and or first or second day actually. And I heard a loud voice on this side say, move. And I thought someone was just being really rude and wanted to get by me. So I looked around and there was no one there. Everybody was focused on the speaker. And so I knew in that moment that it was God speaking to me. Now, for some of you, God may not speak to you audibly, but he speaks to me audibly in my ear. And that's not the only way he speaks to me, but when he wants to get a point across to me, God speaks to me in a few ways, and audibly is one of them. So he spoke to me audibly and said, move. And so when I got home from the conference, I prayed and I said, Lord, where is it that you want me to move? And when are we supposed to move? And so he told me, he gave me an exact date to move. And he told me where to go. He said, Minnesota. And I was like, okay. And I kind of felt like Sarah a little bit because I laughed. I really did, because it was not my plan or agenda to move to Minnesota. Number one, I didn't know anyone here, not really. And number two, it was cold, and I don't like the cold. So leading up to the move, I I actually left my job a few months before because there were some things that were happening, and I just felt like there were other things that I needed to do. And so I prayed and I asked God to release me from the job, and he did. There were some caveats to that release. There were things that I had to do prior to that. And so once I did those things, I had the release to leave. And in the midst of that, there was also an amazing vacation that he provided to me. But you'll read, if you get the book, you'll read all about that. Um, and so I was on my way to what I thought was a great business, great destiny, and all of that shifted, and everything that I thought I had, I lost. So I lost my job, I lost my car, and we ended up staying with a friend. And I was devastated because I thought, well, God, I know I heard you right, or at least I think I heard you. I heard you tell me that to leave the job. And so leaving the job was before he said to move to Minnesota. When he told me to move to Minnesota, I was actually staying with my friend, and things were just, staying with my friend. I was so appreciative and so thankful, and I knew that there was an assignment for me there. And so I fulfilled my assignment. I did what he called me to do there, but it was still a lot. I lost a lot, and I was tired and I was frustrated, and I didn't feel like I felt lost. That's the word I'll use. I felt lost because I knew what I heard, or at least I thought I heard, and it was hard for me to believe that God would take everything away from me. But he told me that he would restore it all back to me. And guess what? He did. He's restored it all back and better. But in the midst of it, it was really difficult. It was really hard. So when I went to that conference and he said to move, I was like, oh, yeah, you're not about to get me into something else again. But because I am who I am, and because I know that obedience is so much better than sacrifice, I did exactly what God said to do. I moved to Minnesota. So I will say this to you, and I'll let you, we're going to go on to the next question. But one of the things that I said to the Lord, I said, Lord, if you provide the flight for me, I will go. I didn't ask him for a hotel. I didn't ask him for, any provisions. I should have, but I didn't. Um, when you read the book, you'll see that God provided for us every step of the way anyway. And he always made a way for us, even when it felt like there was no way. Um, and he provided the flight as I asked, and it was a one-way flight. So I'm saying that to say there was no way for me and my son to get back here. No way that I could see anyway. I'm sure that if he wanted us back to Connecticut, he would have provided a way. But literally every door that was open to us in Connecticut had closed, and so Minnesota had to work. Like it had to work. There was no other choice, right? Um, and that was scary for me. That was super super scary for me. Next question. The next question is, did I have a job lined up or was I going completely in faith? Um, the answer to that is yes and no. Um, I had the promise of a job lined up, and so I thought I would have a job not long after we moved. I put out some feelers when the Lord said move to Minnesota. I did put out some feelers. I put out my resume, and I got a few calls, and I had some phone interviews, and I had one that was very, very promising. And when I hung up from that phone interview, I had the promise of a position. The only thing was we had to just meet face to face, sign some paperwork, and make it official. I got to Minnesota, had the face to face interview. Everything was great. I met the CEO of the company, and it was, I thought, a match made in heaven, or as they say, right? Um, the person who would have been my manager said she would call me on Tuesday to finalize everything, to make sure that, I had all the paperwork needed to start, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Tuesday came and went, and I didn't get a call. I didn't get an email. Wednesday came and went, no call, no email. 2 weeks later, I finally hear back from her, and she says, "Oh, we went with another candidate." I was devastated. I was completely devastated because a part of me was counting on this job to provide for me and my son. Because I moved to Minnesota without a job, without anything. The only thing I had was the money that people had given me when they heard we were leaving, and our flight. That's all we had. When we got here, I didn't even know how we were going to stay in the hotel that the Lord had told me to reserve and to book. I didn't even know that, but he made a way, right? And so I just thought, okay, I'll just get a job and, we'll be okay. But I realize now that God didn't want me to have a job. There was a season where I needed to depend solely on him. And this was that season for me. I had to literally rely on him for my daily bread. He was how I ate. He was how I slept. He was how I got around. Like, the Lord placed people in my life, and he provided every single day for me, so that we never went hungry. We never slept on the street. He provided everything that we needed. Um, the next question is, how did you know you'd make it? I did not. Simply, I didn't. I didn't know. Well, I won't say I didn't. I had faith in God that he would make a way. I just didn't know what that way looked like. So when I say I didn't, it's not that I didn't believe he would make a way. I knew he would. I just had no idea what that would look like. I had no clue what making it in Minnesota would look like. I had no idea where we were going to end up. I had no idea where our housing was going to come from eventually. I had no idea what kind of job I was going to eventually get. I knew we would make it, but I didn't know what the how was. I didn't know how we would make it. I had to solely rely on God. The next question is, were there days when things didn't look like it was going to work out? Yes, there were lots of those days, actually. There were lots of days when I thought, I made a mistake. I didn't hear God. There were lots of days when I thought, this can't be, this can't be God, right? Um, there was one day in particular that brings out to me. And in the book, this chapter is called Shelter Day. And we had, so we have been, we have been blessed with hotel stays. People have been, God had been putting people in our lives to help us throughout this process. And we had come to the end of a stint in a hotel. And I still didn't have a job. I was still looking. I was, doing interviews face to face when I could, and phone interviews for the most part, but still getting my resume out there, still looking for a job. And we had come to the end of a stint in a hotel, and I didn't know where we were going to go. I had no more money. Um, and it didn't look like there was any way. Like, the people that had helped us before couldn't help us anymore. And so there wasn't a way. Like, I had no way to make it, right? And so um my cousin, who I didn't know lived here, but um in the process of, getting to Minnesota and, you know, talking with family, I found out that I have a cousin here. And so he came and picked us up, and he said, "Well, I'll take you guys to the shelter, and, perhaps they can help you." And I have to tell you that when the Lord said to me to move, I was okay with being in a shelter by myself, but I was not okay with being in a shelter with my son, because at the time he was 18. And I knew that because he was 18, they would have separated us and put him in a men's shelter. And that would have been the worst thing, I thought, for him, because he wasn't built for that, right? He wasn't ready for that. I thought I could handle a shelter. Um, but I didn't think he would be able to. So I said, "Lord, I know you didn't bring us all this way to have us go into a shelter now." And people had brought up the shelter, going into a shelter and staying in a shelter and seeing if that would, get us to housing faster, right? But I always declined it, because I thought, God didn't bring me this far to, put us in a shelter. And there's not a knock against shelters. I believe that shelters really do help people, but I felt like God didn't bring me here, get the flight for me, and do all of these things he had been doing every single day up until this point, to leave us in a shelter. So we went to the shelter, and we stood in line, and we got to the end of the line, and the woman said, "What are you here for? How can we help you?" I said, "Well, my son and I need shelter, and you know, we need a place to stay." And she said, "I can't help you." And I thought, "Are you, are you serious? You're a shelter." She said, "We only serve families of three or more." Well, it was just my son and I, so there was no three, right? Um, and that was hard. Like, so she said, "Well, I can give you some bus passes," and that's what I that was all they had. They gave us bus passes, and she said, "When you get your place, come back, and we'll give you some bedding and some mattresses, and you know." And I thought, "Oh, okay." And so we left, and my cousin waited for us, thankfully, and he had all our stuff in his truck. And so he said, "Well, since the shelter didn't provide for you, I guess I have to put you up for a week." And he put us up in a hotel for a week. And I can tell you that in the moment, standing in that line in the shelter, there was a part of me that was devastated. There was a part of me that was like, "God, did I hear you right? Like, did I hear you say move to Minnesota?" I knew that I had heard him, but in that moment, it was just so hard to be in that moment and still trust God. But I did. I never gave up hope. I never gave up my faith. My faith never waned. I still trusted God. But I am human. And I want you to know that part. Like, even in the midst of the bad things that are happening, even in the midst of the crazy, as a human being, it's okay to have an emotion about that. It's okay to say, God, is this you, or is this like, am I is my I'm not losing my faith. I believe you, God, but help my unbelief. And that's where I was like, God, I believe you, I trust you, but please help my unbelief because I'm not sure what's happening right now. And so, yeah, that was a hard day. And there were lots of hard days, but ultimately God brought us through each and every one of them. So the next question is, what did your family think of the journey? So that's actually a funny question and a funny story. I didn't tell my family. I did not tell them. There was one cousin that I confided in, actually two cousins, one on my dad's side and one on my mom's side, that I confided in. But everyone else, no one else knew that we were leaving. No one else knew that we moved to Minnesota. Um, it wasn't until we were there, probably about a month, that I called and said, "Hey, guess what? We moved to Minnesota." And that is so unlike me. But there was a strategy behind it. The strategy was, I knew my family and I know my family and I love them. But I knew that if I said to them, God said move to Minnesota, they would have talked me out of it. Point blank and period. That's it. That's why I didn't say anything. Um, I didn't say anything until we were there and invested. My son was in school. Um, I had several job interviews. I'd had several job interviews and had some lined up. We weren't moving. We weren't moving back. There was no coming back. Um, it was really just, this is where we are and this is where we're going to be until the Lord says otherwise. Um, and I can tell you that that was easier for me to do because at the time of our move from at the time of our move, we lived in Connecticut and a majority of my family lived in New Jersey. So I wasn't seeing them every day. And while we talked on the phone every day or, frequently, it was possible for us to leave without saying anything. Um, and even those who I told were kind of concerned, like, okay, so you're going here and you don't have a job and you are going on faith. Okay. And I know that it was hard for people to wrap their minds around that, but I just knew that God was going to take care of us. And he absolutely did. Every day God provided. Every day he provided for our hotels. Every day he provided food. Like, we never went hungry. We never went hungry. We never lacked for anything. There were even days when I thought, God, if I could just get a cup of coffee, and I would have coffee money. I would have like $2 left for, a small coffee at Starbucks. It was just the little things. Our cell phones never went off. God made sure that I had enough money to pay those. And I'll say this too, while I didn't have a job, I was also still running my business. So I did have income coming in from my business, but it was very sporadic. But I still had something coming in. So it wasn't that I was like totally like without anything, but God still provided every single day in amazing ways. And I detail a lot of it in the book. And in part two, there's even more that I'll go into in detail because our journey was crazy. When people, when I talk to people about it, and people who were in it with us are just like, wow, wow, look at God. Because really it was just him. It was all him. The next question is, did you feel crazy for doing this? Yes, absolutely. Yes, I felt absolutely crazy. Um, I felt like, why me? Like, I can imagine that in the journey, um, I can tell you that I understood what Noah felt when God said to him to get all these materials together and build this ark. Like, Noah's like, yo, it ain't rained here in Never. And you want me to do what? Because what's coming? No. Why? And that's how I felt like, God, why me? Why do I have to do it? Why do me and my son have to be, you know, the catalyst, I'll say, for faith? Like, why do we have to be examples, right? I just want to live a normal life. And I felt crazy. I felt like people were looking at me like, this girl has lost her mind. But I hadn't. I hadn't lost my mind. What I had was faith. I had faith to believe that God was going to do exactly what he said he was going to do, provide. He said that in his word that he would provide for us. So he is Jehovah Jireh, our provider. So why would he not provide for me? I had no intention on moving to Minnesota when I did. I thought maybe perhaps at some point, but not the way that I did. It was God. He wanted me here for a purpose and for a reason. And I'm thankful that I'm here now. But the journey, yeah, I did feel crazy at times. But I'm thankful that I didn't allow that to deter me from doing God's will. So the next question is, would you say that the journey is over? And if so, how did it end? Well, I can tell you that the journey is not over. There's still more to it. And so when part two is released, it will likely end with this part of the journey. And then there may be a part three coming along, depending on what the Lord says to me. But I believe that I know that I'm here for a purpose and for a reason. And he is walking me through that now. And so I am ever grateful. God restored back to me everything that I lost, but better. Um, and when I look back at it, um, I know that it was him. I know that it was him. Have there been tough times? Absolutely. Have there been times when I thought, I should have stayed in Connecticut? Yeah, there have been. Um, but I can tell you this, that the journey of faith for me was necessary. It was necessary to get me um, mature in God. I was maturing in him before I left, but he has brought me to a new level in him. The journey caused me to have a new level of faith in him, a new level of trust in him. And I wouldn't trade that for anything or anybody, honestly. Um, and so I'm thankful for this journey of faith. I'm thankful to God for allowing me and trusting me, yeah, trusting me with this journey of faith. Because I believe that, God gives us or allows us on journeys, but he will only do it if he can trust you with it. That's just my thought. Because if he can't trust you with it, if he knows that you're going to go back and forth and, and not back and forth in your emotions, but you're going to, leave the journey and say, no, I don't want to do this anymore, then, you know, then he's not getting glory from that, right? So I just want God to get glory out of my life. That's all. That's all. So, um, and I think the last question is, what would I say to those on their own journeys of faith? Well, here's what I say. Don't give up. Don't give up. I know that in the journey, it can be hard. It can be a challenge. You can feel as if, you know, you question yourself. Like, did I hear God right? Did he actually say that to me, or was that me? And, for me, here's how I deal with that, right? I didn't want to move to Minnesota. It is cold here. Listen to me. It is cold, okay? I'm going to tell you a story and then I'll be done. But um, I didn't understand the type of cold because I was born and raised on the East Coast. So that we got snow there. We got, in fact, the winter before we moved, my son and I were stuck in the house for a whole weekend because there was 6 feet of snow in front of our door and we couldn't get out. So we had snow. That not a question. We had cold, but the level of cold in Minnesota is literally, and I do mean literally, bone chilling. There were days on our first winter where it was -30, -40. The second winter, there were days where it was -50. Um, when I got my car, there were days when went out to my car and my car, I like turned the key and my car would be like, it's too cold. It's too cold. It wouldn't start because it was that cold. So I did not want to move here. And for me, that lets me know that it was God that I heard. It was him because this wasn't something I wanted to do. It wasn't something that I thought, oh yeah, I'll move to Minnesota and make it work. No, this was him and his divine design for my life. And I am so thankful for his divine design for my life. And I want to encourage you that his divine design for your life is perfect. God's will is perfect. It may not seem like it's working out, but the word of God says all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. If you love God and you are called according to his purpose, it's all going to work out. So don't fret about it. Take the journey, be on the journey, finish the journey, don't stop, keep going. And when you feel like, God, this is too much, talk to him. Tell him. Tell him what, God, this is too much. I don't know what to do. And he will give you the wisdom that you need. I am so thankful for each and every one of you who tuned in today. I am excited to, I would love to continue talking about this, but my time is up. And so I encourage you, if you want to read more or learn more about my journey of faith, pick up my book, The Journey of Faith. It's available on Amazon.com, Target.com, Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com. And you can also get it now today through December 3rd for 20% off on my website, thoughtsofathankfulheart.com. My name is Liela Fuller, and this has been The Journey of Faith. I'm sorry. And this has been The Faith Factor, where we discuss the journey of faith. I hope you have an amazingly blessed day.